activity going on that some of you here in the legislature your representatives may be missing some of these wonderful trips that I saw the buses lined up for, but we had some important business to take care of, and this was the only time we could get a time slot to get it done. So I appreciate you coming this morning. And Coach, would you mind opening us up in a word of prayer?
Don't mind.
I'm glad you don't, since I didn't give you one.
Well, always be prepared.
Please try to hold for less than 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And my light's on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me now? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this meeting that we're about to partake into. Thank you for the people that are here with us. Bless their families who are not with us. Bless everybody that's a part of this meeting. These blessings and other we ask in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much. And as you know, this is a carry forward of the meeting we had, I don't remember, a few weeks ago or a week ago, and we was hoping we'd get it resolved without having to bring it through committee, and I guess maybe there's still an opportunity to do that, but Mr. Jones is back here this morning to present his bill, and we'll turn it over to you.
Do I need to hit my button? Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee members. And again, thank you for getting up on your day off today to be at this committee hearing. I'm here to introduce again and discuss again the infamous pool bill, HB 219. We're dealing with substitute LC 400899 ERS. Just a very brief history. The genesis of this action comes as a result of problems at a local level in Glynn County with the county health department exceeding what we believed was their authority in applying jurisdiction and control over what was clearly or what clearly is a private pool. The purpose of this legislation this morning is to help clarify, more clearly define what is a private pool versus a public pool. Of course, without exception, we all agree that our Department of Health has jurisdiction over public pools. Again, the purpose of this legislation is to more clearly define what is a private pool and where that line of authority from DPH transcends over into the private world. So the bill before you, actually, we've cleaned it up a couple times, tried to clarify, tried to simplify what we were trying to achieve. And as the chairman mentioned, we attempted to resolve this administratively through a couple meetings and with DPH and the other parties that were involved, and we were unable to do so satisfactorily. It felt like we needed to proceed ahead with this legislation in order to get this issue resolved, so we're not dealing with this on a continuing basis. Just again, a brief history. This goes back well over a year, where local delegation, the senator and representative, attempted to resolve this issue with the local Glynn County Health Department, and have been unsuccessful to do so. So here we are with our bill. Basically, what we've done, very simply, is add the word condominium to the list of pools that are considered, and this is on line 54, add the word condominium association to the list of pools that are considered private. Part of the concern in our prior hearing that I expressed reservations about the language of the bill that I presented was it was never our intention to cause this bill to interfere with local zoning and land use ordinances. I felt that the language in the prior version might have brought into question our trying to take that authority away from the local governing authority. So if you flip over to page line 61, what we've done there is said that nothing in this bill shall have any effect over local land use or zoning ordinances or making zoning decisions. So again, the whole focus of this bill is to define that what is a private pool, and that private pools are those that are defined as pools that are not open to the general public, for which there is no fee, daily, monthly, or otherwise charged for the use of that pool, and the use of that pool is restricted solely to property owners and guests of the property owners. So that's the bill basically. We did add a provision, or clarified a provision in Section 2 that says if the private property owners have concerns about the water quality or quality of the pool itself, that they can contact the local health department to ask for an examination and inspection of the pool. But in doing so, we made it clear that that report shall be for informational purposes only, and that's on line 37, that there shall be no fines, fees, charges, or penalties shall be assessed in regard to the inspection or report. So again, the purpose of this bill is just to add the word condominium associations to the list of existing pools that are defined as private pools.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Jones. I have a question specifically around lines 60 through 62 regarding the authority that would be maintained by local governments. What kind of actions would a local government be able to take under a land use or zoning ordinance?
Basically, we're talking about whether somebody can put a pool in their front yard kinds of issues. You know, what local zoning ordinances are in effect regarding where pools in a neighborhood can be built. For example, you know, the addition of fences and other things such as that regarding the actual construction of the pool.
So would that capture the water line issue as well?
No, that's not a zoning issue. That was a later issue relating more to things such as ADA and access, not having to do with actual location or construction of the pool itself. The addition of the water fountain and the shower, which is what came up in Glenn County, we believe are issues that go beyond just zoning and land use. They go to the issues of, again, more access and more ADA and that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Perhaps health issues even, perhaps, but which is not the authority of the DPH or local authority and private pools. Does that clarify?
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Representative Jones. Okay, good. Okay, as I understand this, private homes already in effect, apartments are already in effect, right? And you're just adding condominium associations?
That's it.
So I guess from a common sense standpoint, which sometimes we don't see very much of around here, but it would seem to me that condominiums would be more of a private aspect than the apartment aspect because you're paying homeowners fees and establishing your own privacy. Would that be correct?
You are absolutely 100% correct. And that's why a little bit of the frustration on the part of the local property owners in not being able to work with the local health department in resolving this without having to take this step. So you're exactly correct.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jones, looking at line 35, I'm trying to get the clarity here. You say the county board of health. What is the rationale for having the county out? Are you trying? Are you trying to make sure in your bill that if a person have a pool or hot tub, which I do have a hot tub, and it's very private. No, don't start reading into nothing. Stop
Do we have video?
Stop it.
Do we have video? Do we have video?
Uh-huh.
Do you have video to show?
No. Come on now. You guys are something else. The rationale behind this is to make sure that people that using this facility, they under the guidelines of the health department itself, or what's the rationale behind this?
Not per se the guidelines. You know, those of us who've ever been a part of an association where you pay dues and somebody,
I am.
You know, in your response, you expect somebody that you pay dues to keep the pool clean. In this particular example, normally the recourse would be within the association itself. But what we wanted to do is give the local property owners, members of the association, the opportunity and the right to contact the health department for an inspection of the pool in terms of its maintaining its health quality. Again, the ultimate responsibility for maintaining the proper quality of the pool water in this case would fall back to the condominium association, the HOA. So it's just to give those property owners a bit of a recourse to bring in an outside party, an independent third party, to just measure water quality, to get the HOA to do what they're supposed to do.
Good. Thank you.
You're just basically saying the condominium association is a property owner.
Correct.
Yeah, give it to Jack. This is their first time being here.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms.
Mr. Chairman, I would appreciate it if the members would just kind of let you run this meeting. I think you're real qualified and capable, Chair.
Yeah, y'all just need to come to the meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Am I on, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
He's on it, I'm on here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just got one question, Representative Jones, just for clarification. In line 36, it says that a report would be issued if somebody made a request to the health department to inspect the pool. Who could see that report?
Well, we did not, this bill does not define that, but our intent would be the property owner who made the request, and certainly the HOA management would have a right to see that report. So it's within that private property realm, the property owner that made the request, the HOA itself, the management of the HOA, who would be responsible for making sure that the report was received, read, and complied with. So again, all within that private domain, private property domain.
If Coach Hot Tub is in there, can I see his report?
Unless you,
That's private.
no, sir. Unless you are a member of that HOA, you would not have the right to see the water quality reports from Coach's hot tub.
If he's paying the mortgage, right?
But if you pay in the mortgage, you,
Right.
yes. Anyway,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems as if it's, from what I'm understanding, is that we have apartment complexes that does not have to be regulated, and now we're adding condominiums. That's the gist of the bill.
yes, sir.
My question is that to the people, why would there be anyone that is against that? And if they are, then why are they against it?
That's why we're here today, because we couldn't work out this agreement other than legislatively. To your point.
Mr. Chairman, anybody here against it? To speak? Okay. Then. Okay.
Thank you. Very good question. Thank you.
When you only been here 2 years, that's why you don't come all this stuff. But it's good.
Any other questions from the committee? We've got some people who have signed up to speak on the bill, and the first one would be Keith Hatcher. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just let him sit. If you don't mind,
Yes,
you can sit right here. That'll be good. This-
Georgia Association of Realtors, and I appreciate the opportunity. We heard today, and I'll try to be very brief. I think we fall exactly in line with Mr. Rogers' opinion on this matter. To give you a little bit of history, one of our local realtors contacted Mr. Jones because he was the manager of the condominium complex in Brunswick, which he was surprised to learn was supposedly under regulation of the local code enforcement official. So when we first got contacted, we assumed that we had a rogue local inspector operating outside his authority. And then we started doing some investigation, and eventually we learned that actually Brunswick has gone so far as to create their own category called a semi-private pool. And then we also discovered in the state code there's a definition that includes condominiums. It's our position that that is well beyond what their authority allows them to do. We think they've crossed over from regulation to legislation. And if they wanted to change the definition of a swimming pool, public versus private, they should have come to this body with a piece of legislation to change the law. There are certain things you can do under rules and regs, but I don't think that you can wholesale change your territory. And to Mr. Duke's point, I think the opposition is we want to regulate the world. And we think that's silly. And the truth is, those homeowners have an incentive to maintain a clean pool because they all swim in the pool. And if there's some damage that's created, guess what? There's a liability involved. So there's no need for state oversight in this particular area. So we would urge your adoption and be happy to answer any questions.
Any question from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Chairman.
we also have Chris Rustin from the Georgia Department of Public Health. Thank you, Chris. Murray? Oh, okay.
Chairman Pruitt, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Department of Public Health, and just want to give you a little bit more history about this. And we've had an opportunity to study the impact that this bill will have on the state and on the departments of health around the state. I want to start off with mentioning that, again, our primary mission when we inspect public pools and these privately shared pools like condominiums, apartment complexes, is to protect the public and patrons from waterborne illness and hazards in those pool environments. That's our primary mission when we're in there doing these inspections. If we go back to the original law, Michelle's Law, that was adopted in 1999 and went into effect in December of 2000, was adopted after the unfortunate drowning of a little girl named Michelle in a private, unregulated style, apartment-style pool. That was the original impetus for this law. And ultimately, the purpose of that law was to protect the public health and safety through proper design, operation, and maintenance of swimming pools, public swimming pools. Now, one thing that while the law itself did exempt apartment complexes, it exempted country clubs and subdivisions, the law recognized that about 25 counties in this state, primarily your large metropolitan counties that has the largest number of pools, they recognized that many of these counties had local Board of Health rules in place that regulated these types of pools. Those counties had decided at some point that these pools had a risk and needed to be inspected by the local health departments. So there's been a little bit of, I guess, misunderstanding of that when we say that apartment complexes aren't inspected. They actually are. And in about 70 counties in this state, apartments, country clubs, subdivisions, these types of shared pool environments are inspected because they had rules in place prior to this law which gave them that authority. I understand the heart of this bill is private property rights, and I certainly respect that. That's before this committee today. But as my experience and the experience of many of my public health professionals, as we inspect these types of pools, it's these types of pools that we see the highest risk as we do in our inspection. We all know that in some cases, HOAs, we get calls from HOAs that they're upset with each other, that someone on the HOA doesn't agree with what someone else has said, and they actually call us out there to inspect pools because they're unhappy. Or we get calls from the members of the HOA, the actual property owners, because they don't feel like the HOA is taking some of their concerns seriously. So as we go out and do these inspections, we provide a level of safety and sort of a second set of eyes to this. Now, we're certainly open, as discussed, to taking a look at some of these issues related to deck showers and water fountains, which are in the rules. I mean, we would like to study this issue. But just a little bit about some of the impacts of this particular bill should it pass and be signed into the law. First of all, as we all know, as the Georgia Child Fatality Review Panel has indicated, drowning is the #1 cause of unintentional death in children ages 1 to 4, and the #2 cause of death in children ages 5 to 9. They also recommended to the governor and the legislator that this be a priority, and that one of the issues that they've seen that's been a result of these deaths has been barrier issues, has been gates that didn't latch properly, things that our rules actually cover, and things we look for very closely when we're doing these inspections. Looking through our own data through the Department of Health, about 50% of the pool complaints that we investigate come from these types of pools that are being exempted by this bill. One county health department recently looked at over the last 2 years of their data, and based on, they've had to close because of issues 453 pools because of critical violations, whether it's a gate not latching properly, a chemical issue, a drain issue that could suck a child to the bottom of a pool. This bill would exempt 344 of those pools that they had to close for critical issues. That's 76% of those types of pools that the health department had to close in the last 2 years. And out of those 344 pools, 643 inspection violations were found at these types of pools. I can go on. There's been various studies done by CDC and others that indicate that apartment, condo, HOAs, townhome-style pools are consistently cited with the most serious pool violations. These are the things that we're seeing in the field, not just in Georgia, but across the country. A study that was done in 2012 by CDC in the metro Atlanta area found that out of 161 pools, 50% of those pools had E. coli genetic material in their backwash water. The impact of this bill to our local inspections around the state we currently inspect about 9,000, a little over 9,000 pools in the state of Georgia. This bill would eliminate 6,516 of those pools being inspected. That's 71% of these pools that we currently inspect in Georgia would be eliminated by this bill. We've conservatively estimated that's about 24 million people visits in a pool season that's impacted, and over 130 million gallons of water that's impacted. But from a fiscal standpoint, I know, Representative Turner, you asked at the last meeting about a fiscal impact, and we've been able to get that data from the local health departments. This is over a $2 million fiscal impact to the local health departments around the state, and it could result in approximately 28 environmental health specialist positions being eliminated and 8 seasonal staff being eliminated across the state. These particular environmental health staff don't just inspect pools. They inspect restaurants, they inspect hotels, they inspect septic tank systems. So these individuals aren't just pool inspectors. So when we lose this staff, we're also losing our depth in other programs as well, which is going to have impacts on other environmental health services across the state. We believe that if 71% of pools lose inspection, that waterborne illnesses will increase in this state, injuries will increase, and there is a potential for drownings to increase. So in analyzing the impact of this, we feel like that there is a major impact to the health of people using these types of pools. Yes. Yes, sir.
Is it not true that you're saying that our apartment complex pools inspected or not inspected?
In some counties, they are inspected, and the reason for that is the original Michelle's Law acknowledged and allowed existing counties that had ordinances and rules in place to keep their rules. They had to have those in place prior to December 31st of 2000. So in many of those counties that had rules in place, they had already decided that they wanted to inspect these types of pools. So yes, sir, in some counties, and primarily your metropolitan larger counties, these types of pools are inspected currently.
So you're saying if they had the inspection process in place prior to
the original law, correct.
So actually they are inspecting apartment pools.
Yes, sir.
If they did not have it in place, then apartment pools are not being inspected.
That's correct. Any county that did not have rules in place were subject to the Department of Public Health rules and regulations, which this law authorizes and adds those exemptions in the law.
I've got a quick question. I think just the biggest basic thing is, and well, first off, I've got 2 questions. One, all those you talk about would not be inspected going forward. Was that just condominiums?
No, sir. That's all
right.
of the.
So how many condominiums? I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Well, this bill actually exempts more than just condominiums.
I realize that. I'm going to get into that in just a second.
I don't have the exact number of condominiums. I believe it was around 459 condominiums statewide.
Okay. And why, can you just give me a basic answer, why condominiums are treated any different than apartments?
They're not necessarily treated any differently in those counties that had rules in place. Those counties that had rules in place prior to this original law have already, that's why Glenn County inspects condominiums, because under their authority that they had in place prior to this original law, they had decided that that was a type of pool that they wanted to inspect because of the risk. And one thing to keep in mind in the coastal region, many condominiums are also secondary residences and are also put on the rental market for the public.
Okay, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I have a problem with here is that apartment owners, people that own those property, I'm wondering, I know pools probably is one of the selling points for them to rent out their property. And even though Michelle's Law here and I have some concern about some of these laws because parents are so negligent. I'm thinking about dropping a bill for parent neglect bill, that they need to start being more responsible for their children, and that we need to stop some of these laws. But however, it wouldn't that hurt their business if they don't have a pool? Isn't that one of their selling points, by having a pool on that property? And wouldn't it affect them making some money?
Yes, sir, I believe, and I don't want to paint a picture that all apartments and HOA-style pools are bad, because that's an incorrect statement. I think what we've seen, though, is that in a lot of times when apartments are brand new, certainly that is a huge selling point. But as those apartments age, we start seeing that the pools start going downhill, for lack of a better term. And I would like to say that they would want this to be their pristine selling point, but in many cases, as I've inspected over the last 15 to 16 years, we've found consistently problems at these types of pools.
Yeah, I know I have some friends that they can afford homes, but they rather live in apartments because they don't want to cut the grass. And, you know, I don't want to do anything or make a decision here and hurt one group and help another one. I want to get as much information as I can to make a wise decision if we have to make a decision here today.
Thank you. Representative Turner.
Thank you. I guess I want to go back to Representative Jones, if I could. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Is it your intent to have this apply to only those counties that did not have rules adopted at the time of this Michelle's Law? Is it your intent to have something that's changing things statewide?
Changing things statewide.
Okay. Thank you.
And I might refer to lines 44 through 48, where we talk about where local rules and regulations governing public swimming pools are not in effect on December 31st, 2000. Nothing in this chapter shall be construed to limit the authority of a county to adopt an ordinance or resolution regarding public swimming pools that apply to apartment complex pools. Again, we're defining private versus public.
Right, but we are in fact changing the public swimming pool definition, right? I mean,
correct.
Okay.
Adding condominiums.
So
yes.
on that line 47, would public swimming pools at that point would also mean condominiums on a statewide basis?
That would be my interpretation. Yes.
I just want to make sure that's what you intended to do,
yes.
and I'm reading it the same way as
yes.
you want to
yes,
happen.
Sir. Thank you. Good question.
Representative Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for Department of Public Health. So, right now, if you own if you're in a condo association, can you request that the Department of Public Health come out and test your pool?
You can. That was currently in the original law, but there's been additions added to that limits our authority.
Okay. And tell me about what limits the authority on that. I know that I believe, and I'm going back to our last hearing on this, that they can issue that the Department of Health can issue what to the condominium, and then what is the responsibility of the condominium complex after that?
Well, the way it's currently written, or the way it was previously written, is upon request we can go out and do an inspection on these types of pools.
And who can request that? Does it have to be the owner, the individual owner of the actual unit, or?
Basically, the way it was originally written, it says a member was added, or owner of an apartment complex style pool could request an inspection of that pool. As I stated earlier, I don't believe, at least in my experience, I've never had that many requests to come out and do a voluntary inspection on a pool. But the way the law has currently been proposed is that if we're requested, we could provide that service and issue a report, but no matter what we find, whether it's a major safety hazard or we can only just make recommendations. It's not binding. There's no authority on the health department to make them correct any hazards.
Okay. May I ask a follow-up, please?
Absolutely.
And then, so with the condominiums in the counties where you now have the jurisdiction to oversee, how do you get to doing the inspections there? Do do you have a schedule as a Department of Health that you follow? So whether someone is asking you to show up or not, you're doing like random visits?
The way that the inspection process works, the rule requires us to do a minimum of 2 inspections in a season. So if a condominium pool is open for a season, we would do an operational opening inspection, which is usually around Memorial Day when most people are trying to get their pools open. And then we would do 2 operational inspections during the pool season, and they're random. We don't schedule those inspections, but we provide. So basically, 3 inspections are done. Now, if it's a year-round pool, if it's open year-round, we do 2 operational inspections within that year. So that we don't do a large number of inspections, and there's no defined schedule. They're fairly random.
Fairly random. All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Williams.
Back to inspection. Do you think you have enough inspectors?
Currently?
Yes.
No, sir.
You don't?
No.
How short are you?
The economy, unfortunately, as with many programs across the state, we've lost about 85 environmental health staff from 2008 to current. So at one point we had about 460 staff across the state. We're down to about 380 as we speak. So in many of our areas around the state, the environmental health offices struggle with current services because of that shortfall in staffing.
I have one question for Representative Jones. Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. Representative Jones, do you think the bill that you have in front of us, is this a good bill?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
is it good for Georgians?
Yes, sir, it is. Truly it is. I will tell you, I've learned, again, as a freshman, thinking this particular bill, when I was asked and approached to deal with this, that this would be a simple matter. I can assure you this has been vetted thoroughly by many, many parties from many, many different perspectives. And the bill you see before you is the culmination of all that vetting. And yes, I believe it is good for Georgia, good for the public, and good for private property owners. Yes,
I don't see you as a freshman. Do you know where the bathroom at in the interim?
I finally found the bathroom, yes, sir.
You're not a freshman.
I drink a lot of water, and that's an important consideration for me.
Good.
Representative McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I guess Representative Jones, I've heard this 2 or 3 times already. But you know, when I'm correct. You're correct. When we first started this public-private, I mean, the definition was key to me. You know, condominiums, you know, were always private. It was never meant to be public. And you know, and I do understand rental property, XYZs, and things of that nature. And I do understand when we first started this, it was about, you know, if it was public, you know, you got to have some water, and you got to have you know, if you say it's public, you got to have a restroom and
yes, sir.
XYZ and those things. I guess you all wondering where my question is going to come from, but you know, the question is are we defining condominiums as private, or are we defining them as public?
Condominiums are being added to the definition of what is considered a private pool.
Okay. And that's question number 1. And question number 2, and it's difficult for DPH to agree to that, the definition of private.
Well, I certainly understand the private property rights in this state. What's difficult for us to accept is that while it's private, these are shared by a large number of people. And the risk that when you put that many people in a pool, the risk increased dramatically. We've seen it time and time again from outbreaks that we've had around the state. So we certainly have a concern that our vulnerable population here is children, and we have a concern that we're going to see an increase in risk across the state if our inspection authority is curtailed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's get our Vice Chairman first. Vice Chair.
I'd like to address that comment, and I most certainly agree with you that, you know, we want to do everything that we can do to protect our children. But at the same time, I'm sitting here thinking about this, and you talk about, well, a gate latch or things of that nature. Well, there also comes a point, as to Representative Williams' point a minute ago about parental responsibility and individual responsibility. Are we going to get to the point in apartments or condominiums or even in private homes where we walk in and we look to see that the cords of the blinds are adjusted right or whatever, because there's a possibility that a child may get tangled up in it? Somewhere along the line, individual responsibility has to come in. And I believe me, I can understand your situation, but I do have a very, very real concern that that's one of the problems that we're seeing in government right now, is that we've become, I hate to use the word nanny state, but in some cases we have. That's just a blanket comment, not a question. Thank you.
Representative Dickerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a motion at the proper time. And I also wanted to note that I think we've heard this bill 3 or 4 times. And I think that the improvements that have been made have been good.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
And any other questions or any other comments? Got one more that'd like to speak from the, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Hayden Stanley. We represent the Georgia Apartment Association. Appreciate the committee's time on this issue. A couple of points that I'd like to make as you have other issues to work on today. I'll be brief. My understanding of the difference between an apartment complex pool, which is private, and an apartment complex pool that may be public, would be if that apartment complex pool, for some reason, opens itself to the public through external memberships and that type of thing. A private pool is for the use of the owners, the residents, and their invited guests only. And that, it's confusing because there are so many different labels put on these pools, but that's my understanding of the difference there. And then the second question is just one that I'd ask you to look at, maybe technical in nature. In Section 2, you come in and you're adding appropriately condominium associations so that we have parity. All private pools are treated the same. In Section 3, however, specifically on line 54 through and 55, subsection 2, there may need to be the addition of the word apartment complexes in that line to make sure that all private pools are treated the same. Where you treat all the same in 2, I don't think you do in 3, and that would be an observation that I would bring to the committee.
Okay, thank you, and I'll refer to the author of the bill as to whether or not you would think that apartments needed to be added.
Well, certainly it could help more clearly define and identify that it's our intent to include private apartment complexes in this legislation. So I would certainly be amenable to an amendment to the legislation to include that, the addition of that word, or those words actually, apartment complex.
What line is that?
46.
Just sit tight. To the author of the bill, if you look at lines 46 through 48, can you kind of help me understand what that is actually
Well, and
referring
to our witnesses' comments, honestly, the reason that apartment complexes is not included in lines 54 below is because of the language in lines 44 through 48. And to the comments made by the DPH, what we're saying is if there are local regulations in effect governing public swimming pools, and again, I think in the case of apartment complexes where apartments sell their pool services, if you will, by fee to outside people, we're saying that if there's a regulation in effect December 31st, 2000 regarding those pools, that nothing in this chapter would limit the county to take care of those public swimming pools. Again, public being open to the public by fee, daily, monthly, yearly kinds of fees. So I think the addition of the word apartment complex in lines 54 would perhaps clear up the language. I'm not so sure that it isn't already covered by the language in that earlier lines of that section.
Well, it looks like to me between 46 and 48, you're basically saying that the local authority can write whatever rules they want to for apartments.
Well, where they're defined as public pools. So I would agree with the recommendation at that point, because again, we want there to be clarity here, that we add apartment complexes to Section 3, Section 2.
Well,
B2.
have we ever had an issue with the definition of apartments?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Chairman. That has not been the issue. Again, the issue with this regulation or with the enforcement issue, again, has not been with apartment complexes, but with condominiums. And the fact that local...
I wanted to pose the question for the committee's consideration and legislative council's input.
I don't know if that actually fixes the problem. I look at 46 through 48, and it looks like to me you've given the locals jurisdiction to do what they want to over pools, the authority to...
Well, line 47 is key. The words public swimming pools are obviously key to that section, and and our definition of what is private versus public.
Okay. So, to the author, would you don't have any objection to adding apartments in let's see, condominium association, apartments, comma, townhomes, comma, or timeshares?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. I think that would be a good addition.
Does that satisfy?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your consideration.
Hayden, is the intent of this then is to add such that apartment complexes will also not be regulated? It says no county, municipality, consolidated government shall adopt or enforce any ordinance, rules, regulations, or resolutions regarding. So if we add apartment complexes in there, we're saying that they will also not be part of this regulation.
Well, at the current time, apartments are not included. They are considered private at the current time.
Yes, sir.
So we could actually put the language, if we like, to say association private apartment complexes.
I think that helps clear it up, Mr. Chairman.
I think that, because if you have an apartment complex that's built with public money, then I would think that they could be subject to.
No, but that would be like the apartment complex. For clarity, Mr. Chairman. See, because basically, I was here in 1999 when we did this, and it was as a response to a public outrage. And typically what happens in those kinds of situations, the pendulum will swing too far to try to address a problem in one given situation. I guess what my concern is, though, is that through all this in our deliberation, we want to be very deliberate such that we don't swing it too far the other way, because once we do, then we'll be right back where we were in 1999, and everybody be sitting around saying, why did the legislature do this? So I guess I would like to have some level of clarity as to when you say, what is a private apartment complex? Is it one that is built with public funds, or is it one that is built for rent to the public with private funds?
Let me see if I can help a little bit here. First off, I didn't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. This whole code section, in meeting with Legislative Council, this whole code section has to be rewritten this summer. It is in total disarray based on their comments and what they have looked at. So we will all, whoever would like to be involved this summer, will go in and we will sit with Legislative Council and we will look at redoing this whole code section, and we will come back with a bill next year that has all the clarification that hopefully we all can agree on, But at the present time, what we're trying to do is fix one situation, and without hurting anyone and without getting too deep into the code section, the author just wants to add condominiums to the same category that apartments are already in, which says that they're actually private and not public. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It does. I mean, and it addresses my earlier concern. I think the pendulum swung so far one way until we just tried to fix one particular problem, not realizing the actual impact that we were having on the totality of these kinds of pools. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that let's come back and try to find something that is going to be measured that actually addresses the problem.
Well, there's a lot more to it than what we just see right here in this one piece of legislation. But at the current time, I think the author's intent was saying that condominiums ought to be treated the same as apartments are already being treated as of today.
Yes,
and
sir.
As
that is
we
correct.
rework the code, then we'll look at that again in the summer. But right now, I personally don't see that condominiums are any different than apartments, unless you have apartments that are actually built for rental basis, and then even then it's long term. So I don't know. There's a lot of definition in apartments, but right now apartments are considered private. They're not considered public, but condominiums are actually considered public.
Okay. Well, I mean,
and they look like they'd be in the same category.
The commitment to come back and rework it is one.
Any other
so
questions?
That we can move on because
Vice Chair.
Mr. Stanley, when we talked about inserting the word private, you looked like you had some questions.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. And again, I think my point I'm trying to deliver this morning is private pools are private pools. Apartment communities are private pools under current law.
Right.
And if we're going to define private pools to include other types of entities and then use that definition throughout the code, it should remain consistent, which is why I brought the issue into Section 3 where it appears that it's not.
So I think if we try to add condominiums, put them to the same level as apartments, keep it consistent, and then maybe review the code this summer, that may be the best solution. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Who's got a question? Nobody? All right, I'll ask the author if you have any other comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to wrap up, again, as I mentioned in response to Coach Williams, Representative Williams' question, this, what seemed to be a simple piece of legislation, has been thoroughly vetted. And I do believe that this is in the best interest of Georgia, public and private, and I ask your favorable consideration with a due pass on this bill. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair.
I think Representative Dickerson wanted to make.
Oh, Representative Dickerson. No, we don't have an amendment. Nobody offered it.
No,
Nobody offered an amendment.
Just when we offer amendments after a due pass vote.
No, it's first. Amendments first.
Amendments first.
Okay. Well,
But I don't have nobody offered an amendment that I'm aware of.
well, I would move to amend, Mr. Chairman, if that's appropriate.
Absolutely. I was hoping somebody would, but.
I guess out of order. I'm sorry.
All right. And what would your amendment be?
Let's see, on line 54, between subdivision and condominium association, insert the word apartment complex.
I second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Motion carries. Now, you want to recognize you for a motion? You make a motion that we have a due pass on LC 400899ER as amended. We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All In favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much for being here early this morning. And
Thank
I
you, committee.
apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You can have the rest of the day off without pay.
Representative Jones, do me a favor. When you go to the well, don't tell everybody you got a simple little bill.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, goodness.